Assalamu alaikum, UK. This is Yasmin Mogahed. I just wanted to come live, give you some information about this upcoming tour to the UK. I'm really excited about this tour. One of the things I'm really excited to announce is that I'll be bringing a new course to this particular tour, and that course is called I Seek Change, and I'll be giving you a little bit more information about that specific course, but before that, allow me to just go over which cities are going to be covered in this tour. I'm going to be having 2 events in London. One of them is going to be a full day course, and then there'll be an evening seminar as well in London. I'm also going to be coming to Manchester, inshallah, Bradford. I'm going to be going to Blackburn for the first time. I'm also going to be going to Birmingham, inshallah. So this tour is going to be pretty packed, and I'm forward to the new topics that I'm going to be covering. So I Seek Change is a seminar in which I'm going to be talking about things that are affecting us day to day, and maybe some things that we don't always talk about, some things that aren't discussed maybe within the community much. Topics like depression and loneliness, sihr, black magic. These are the kinds of things that may be somewhat taboo or have continued to be somewhat taboo, but they are topics that are affecting us every day. These are things that people are struggling with. So I'm going to, inshallah, be talking about these and other very important pressing topics in this new course. I've been, alhamdulillah, I've had the opportunity to come to the UK for many years now, and as each time when I come, I get the opportunity to meet with people and actually all over the world. Whenever I travel throughout the world, I get to meet with people, I get to talk to people one-on-one, and I get to find out the kinds of things that are affecting us in our communities, the kinds of things that people are struggling with personally and in their families and in their communities. And so those are the things that I really want to start to talk about. Unfortunately, I think that too many of these things have gone under the rug. People haven't been talking about these issues, and as a result, people are suffering. And there's a lot of superstitions, I'd say, out there, a lot of myths surrounding these topics. And so I think it's extremely important that we talk about these issues openly and not shy away from them, and also talk about what does our deen, what guidance do we have in our deen. I'll also be taking a psychology perspective as well. So I'll be combining the two, and of course we'll be getting a lot of direction and wisdom from our deen, which we have a multitude of. I want to also do something a little bit different this time, and that is I'm very interested in talking with people. I'm not interested I'm not interested in talking at people. And so what I want to do this year is I want to know what your specific questions are. And so what I want to try to do is collect some of your questions before I come to the UK, so that when I stand and teach, I'm actually talking about the specific issues that you guys are dealing with, and because I think a lot of times when we attend seminars, a lot of it tends to be maybe theoretical, and maybe we can't necessarily apply, or maybe it isn't stuff that applies to us, or it isn't stuff that's very relatable. I don't want to do that. I want it to be relatable. I want it to be something that we can take home and actually really benefit from. So what I want to do is I want to hear from you. I'm going to take a few minutes on this live broadcast and actually take your questions, and then I want to continue the discussion. I obviously won't have an opportunity on a very short live stream to be able to cover all your questions here. However, I do want to read through all your questions that you submit, and I want to bring those questions with me when I come to the UK. Now, a couple details about the tour. Again, I'll be covering Birmingham, Bradford, Manchester. I'll be having 2 in London, inshallah, and Blackburn, inshallah. I'm excited to come for the first time. I'll also be having meet and greets. I'll be having my brand new book. I have my new edition of Reclaim Your Heart. A lot of people have read Reclaim Your Heart, but we've come out with a new edition that has 4 new chapters. And if I get a chance, inshallah, I'll read an excerpt from it. But the 4 new chapters in the new edition. And then my brand new book, which came out this last year, is Love and Happiness. And I'm also going to have that available at this tour, inshallah. And we'll be having signings and an opportunity to meet and greet as well. So let me just give you guys a little bit of details. So for the tour, there are some tickets that the early bird special or the early registration is ending tomorrow, some of the cities. So make sure you get your tickets. Some of them will be ending Friday, the early bird or early registration discount. So make sure you get your tickets before that ends and also before it sells out, inshallah. Now, as I now I'm going to open up the chat box thing. You can just write in your question as a comment. Write in your questions regarding what kinds of issues do you want discussed? And as I mentioned, the theme, the new course that I'll be teaching, I Seek Change. I'm going to be covering some of these so-called taboo topics, issues of depression, loneliness, sihr, and other things that we struggle with every day in our everyday life, but aren't necessarily discussed openly. So if you can go ahead and write your questions, I'll look through them. I'll cover what I can in these few minutes that I have here. But those that are not covered, I will, inshallah, bring with me. I will read through them, and I will, inshallah, cover them during the tour, inshallah. So what I'll do right now is I'm just going to read a short excerpt first, the introduction from Love and Happiness. I'm going to read that first, and then I'll read an excerpt from one of the new chapters of Love and Happiness while your questions come in. Things fall apart and they break sometimes. Like many of you, my journey hasn't always been easy. Pain is very real, and so is loss. Sometimes it's so hard not to let the weight of what we carry or the memory of what we've lost take over. Many of us know the reality of struggle, and so many people suffer in silence. It is hard. It is hard not to give up when we face the repeated disappointments of life. Like some of you, I have known loneliness. I have known defeat. I have fallen many times chasing mirages and broken many bones, making castles in life's fading sands. Sometimes all it took was one solid wave to destroy what I had spent years building. And so I decided to give it a voice, all of it, the tears, the pain, and the lessons. The things which I saw and learned and gained along my life path needed a voice. I wanted to give back in hopes of helping myself and others survive. But then it wasn't only about surviving. I didn't just want people to survive inside their storms. I wanted people to thrive inside their storms. And so I wrote as I walked through my own. The voice and my letter to the world, they became my deepest attempt to not only pick myself up, but others along the way. I wrote because just as we will fall in life, so will we rise. That's the thing about this world. It never only gives us one kind of path. There is pain, yes, and loss, and even darkness, but there is also light, there is hope, there is beauty, and there is also love and happiness. So that's the introduction for my new book that just came out, and inshallah will be available. I'm going to just read a short excerpt from Reclaim Your Heart, and this is one that is from the new chapters, and it's one that it's about a topic that many of us struggle with, I'd say, and that is understanding how and of putting our full trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's about tawakkul. He was devastated. His only source of nourishment had disappeared. It was all he knew, and then it was gone. Suddenly the world grew cold, and only strangers surrounded him. The newborn child screamed. he thought his life was over. What the child did not realize was that there was someone taking care of him. There was a plan for him. And in place of everything that had been taken away, his protector would provide something better. The nourishment he had once received only through blood would soon come through his mother's milk, and the lifeless walls of the womb, once thought to be his only protection, would soon be replaced by the comfort of his family's arms. And yet, to this newborn child, it seemed he had lost everything. Many of us find ourselves like this child. There are times when we feel we have lost everything, or things look broken and nothing like how we wish they would be. At times, we even feel as though we've been abandoned and nothing is working out the way we planned. But just like the newborn child, things are very often not what they seem. And tawakkul, putting our trust and reliance on Allah, is realizing that our protector has a plan for us. Tawakkul is having complete trust that Allah's plan is the best plan. Tawakkul is having full faith that Allah will take care of you, even when things look impossible. Tawakkul is standing in front of the Red Sea, as Prophet Musa ﷺ did, with an army behind you and not even flinching, knowing that Allah will get you through. It is having full faith that even when Allah takes away the umbilical cord, He will replace it with milk. There can be no faith without tawakkul. And if there is true faith, tawakkul must always follow. Allah says in the Quran, the believers are those who, when Allah is mentioned, their hearts become fearful. And when His verses are recited to them, it increases them in faith. And upon their Lord they rely, or they have tawakkul. If one truly understands the reality and the power of Allah, one will realize that it is in fact an infirmity of the human mind to not rely on God. Nothing in the entire universe happens except by the permission of Allah. Not even a leaf falls from a tree without His leave, without His permission. It is He who provides for everything in existence. He has power over all things, and in His hand is the dominion of the heavens and the earth. Chapter 67, verses 1 and 2. So how can we not but put our entire trust in Him? Allah tells us in the Quran, say, never will we be struck except by what Allah has decreed for us. He is our protector, and upon Allah let the believers rely. Chapter 9, verse 51. And the Quran explains, and whoever relies upon Allah, then He is sufficient for him. Chapter 65, verse 3. And the reality is that there is nothing, nowhere else that will be sufficient. Allah is the only handhold that never breaks. Our messenger said, if you trust Allah with the right kind of tawakkul, He will provide for you sustenance as He provides for the birds. They go out with empty stomachs and come back in the evening with their stomachs full. And just like He does for the birds and the newborn child, Allah provides from us and provides for us from places we can never imagine. So that was just an excerpt from one of the new chapters on tawakkul in Reclaim Your Heart. Now what I'll do is I will look and try to take some of the questions. Okay, so one person asks, what is the best dua for the fulfillment of wishes? Okay, so there's a dua in the Quran in which Musa alayhi salam, this was during the time when Musa alayhi salam has escaped from Pharaoh, and he is now trying to leave and find his livelihood. After he helps the two women with their giving water to their animal, he goes and he makes this very special dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rabbi inni lima anzalta ilayya min khayrin faqir. Rabbi inni lima anzalta ilayya min khayrin faqir. My Lord, I am verily poor. I am poor for whatever good you send down to me. I think this is one of the best du'as, that kind of all-encompassing du'as for the fulfillment of wishes, for goodness. As we know, after he made this dua, he went on to get married and get a job. And so we find that his rizq was opened on him after making this dua. This is a very, very great dua to repeat and to memorize if possible. Again, Rabbi inni lima anzalta ilayya min khairin faqir. It is an ayah in the Quran, in the story of Musa alayhi salam. I don't have the exact reference, but it is one of the most powerful du'as for opening of rizq and for the fulfillment of wishes. Okay, so there's a couple questions about, is spirituality enough? One asks, is spirituality, spiritual treatment enough to cure depression and anxiety? And should we not go for medication? Another one asks, if you read the Adhkar and pray on time, is this sufficient to fight these evil energies? Okay, and then someone saying depression sometimes caused by sihr. Okay, so these are all topics which inshallah we'll be talking about more in detail. When it comes to depression, depression is a topic that is not, it's a simple black and white topic. In mental health issues in general, they can't just be put in a box, very simple. And I think that for a long time we've been, as a community, sort of having one extreme or another in this whole discussion. We can't do that when it comes to things like mental health. There are, I think on the one extreme, there are people who say that, you know, if you have Iman, you'll never go through any mental health issues, or if you have Iman, you'll never be sad. You know, a believer should never be sad. Sadness is from the shaitan. These kinds of, you know, sort of slogans that we hear, which are not true. These are false. Of course, we know there are stories in the Quran where prophets were sad, right? We know that Yaqub alayhi salam and you know, the story of how he lost, after he lost Yusuf alayhi salam, that he says that I only complain to Allah of my sadness. So he had sadness. We know he cried until he went blind. So he obviously cried, and yet at the same time he had sabrun jameel. He had beautiful patience. So we know that there isn't a contradiction between patience and crying, for example, necessarily. We know that even prophets felt sadness. We know that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ went through the year of sadness when he lost his wife and his uncle. So that's a myth, and we have to start to come back to the middle and the balance. But I think there's another extreme, which is this idea that all mental health issues are just medical issues, that they're just biological, and that the only solution is through medication. And of course, I believe, you know, and even psychologists will say that just that approach, you know, completely to say all mental health issues are medical, is also another extreme. I mean, there are many theories in psychology when it comes to the cause and treatment and proper treatment for depression and anxiety, and that particular opinion is just one, the medical type, you know, that type of opinion. That there are lots of other theories, even in secular psychology, talking about, you know, the cognitive behavioral psychologists, for example, and talking about that how our thinking affects our thinking and our behavior affects our psychology. So there are many theories, and there's one psychologist I read, you know, he was explaining that he believed that a lot of, if not the vast majority of depression and anxiety is actually a symptom of another issue. And he explained that sometimes, and again, these are all theories, right? These are all different opinions, that he explained that depression and anxiety come as a symptom of an underlying issue that needs to be addressed. And when we only treat the psychology, the depression and the anxiety, we're only treating the symptoms, but we may not be treating the cause, the underlying cause. And he explained that oftentimes the underlying cause is that there is something missing with regards to a relational need, that there is an essential relational need that isn't being fulfilled. And we have needs as human beings. We're not just robots. We're not just made up of chemicals and hormones, but we are also heart, body, and soul. And so there's other parts to the human being, and it's all connected. We have to understand that it's all one piece. So he explains that this can be a symptom of an underlying something that's missing. And he explains that sometimes because we have these relational needs, we have a need to connect to others. We have a need for safety, a need for safe relationships. And so sometimes, for example, if a person does not have that, maybe if a person is being verbally abused in their relationship, or they feel unsafe, or they are being physically abused or sexually abused, or there's something missing, that the symptom of that becomes the depression and the anxiety. But the depression and anxiety isn't the disease itself, but rather it's a symptom of these other things that are missing or that need to be solved. So again, there's many issues, and of course there's some cases where there is an actual medical or biological or chemical deficiency. And that there are other mental health issues like bipolar or bipolar, where there are chemical imbalances as well, schizophrenia, etc. However, it is not just a black and white issue. Even dietary, there's dietary. I was speaking to this doctor that I met at one of the conferences I was at, and she was talking about how she did a lot of research, and she uses natural, just dietary changes to treat a lot of these chronic illnesses. And she says she's had 100% success rate with treating chronic illness and different illnesses, not just mental health, ADHD, things like that, but also physical chronic illnesses. So there's a lot out there. It's not just black and white. Now, when it comes to spirituality, and I'll get to that topic, our afkar and the remembrance of Allah, I will say that these are very, very powerful treatments. I cannot come and I can't say that it is black and white, that this is all you need necessarily. I can't say that, because again, things are complicated. There's many, many issues, and there's many factors to any equation. But I will say that there is no weakness in seeking help, that seeking help for these issues can actually be part of our worship, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger told us to tie our camel, and tying our camel means taking action for having tawakkul, as I just read about, that he said in this hadith, "Aqilha wa tawakkal," have tie your camel and put your trust in Allah. That the two are simultaneous. They're not mutually exclusive. So going and seeking help is part of tying your camel. The Prophet Musa alayhi salam, when he was standing in front of the Red Sea, and he had complete trust in Allah, right? He said, "Kalla inna ma'i rabbi sayahdin." Indeed, my Lord is with me; He'll guide me through. But at the same time, Allah asked him to do something, to take an action. He was told to take his staff and to strike the sea. And so there was something he was asked to do. He was doing his part, right? Just as Hajar, when she was in the middle of the desert, had no water. Again, she didn't just sit there. She didn't lay there and wait for water to come, but she stood up and she ran between Safa and Marwa. She was taking action, and this was part of her tying her camel. And so going and seeking help when you are, having an issue, whether it's a marital issue or it's a psychological issue or a mental health issue, going and seeking help is actually part of what we're told to do. We are not, having trust in Allah doesn't mean that you don't seek help and take the means. So it's very important that we understand that. There's no shame in that. That doesn't mean that you're weak in faith, but rather part of tawakkul is also taking the means and tying your camel. So with regards, however, to the adhkar, I cannot emphasize enough how powerful the adhkar are in protecting us and treating us. It is a cure. It is a very, very powerful treatment for depression, for anxiety, as well as sihr and matters of the unseen. It's literally the only protection we have from the unseen. Obviously, we can't call the police to protect us from shaitan and his army. We can't call Ghostbusters. Like, they're not going to They're not going to help us. There's nothing we can't, Trump isn't going to be able to do anything for us, and not that he would necessarily do, but the point is that we cannot seek help and protection from these unseen forces from anywhere else except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's important that this becomes part of our regular regimen. It is a very powerful cure psychologically, mentally, as well as from the unseen and these evil forces that you're mentioning. And so protection from ayn and hasad and sihr and all of these things, and shaitan and his waswasa, right? There's a huge part of our lives that are affected by just the whispering of shaitan and his army, Iblis and his army. So the adhkar are essential in protecting us from that. And I'll talk more in specifics about the adhkar and the power of the adhkar and what exactly we need to be doing during the tour. But just to summarize, there is an app called My Dua, MYDUAA. And some of you have heard me talk about this, and some of you have actually taken my advice and downloaded it onto their phone or whatever and use it. But the morning supplications, the evening supplications, the supplications before bed, that these are very powerful. And that's why this collection is called Fortress of a Muslim, because indeed it is a fortress and it protects us from the unseen enemy. Okay, so there's some other questions about ruqya, etc., and then a lot of different comments about various cities to come to. So I'll just, with regards to specifically ruqya, someone's asking about blowing on water. So when it comes to the protection from sihr and ruqya, and inshallah we'll go into more detail. There are certain practices that we have out there which are not part of the sunnah or the sharia, and there are some that are. So what I'll do, I'll just kind of name just one thing that is part of the sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ advised us to do, and that is that when you recite, he used to recite so Ayatul Kursi, the 3 quls, and he would blow on his hands and he would wipe on his body, and he even did that over his children, and sometimes Aisha radiallahu anha would do that on the Prophet ﷺ. So that is completely according to the sunnah. There's no bid'ah in that, but this is what the Prophet ﷺ used to do, and this is the ruqya that we're taught to do, is to recite. We can blow on our hands and wipe on the body, and also scholars have also recite, and there is also references for reciting on water and as well. We'll talk inshallah more about which kinds of things are not from the sunnah and which kinds of things are considered bid'ah and we should avoid. But just keep in mind that it is the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that protects us. It isn't by wearing a necklace. That's one thing that I really want to emphasize. I know this is a big business, especially in certain parts of the world, to make these things that we put around our necks or hang in our houses and car or whatever. That's not where we get protection from. Protection comes from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and doing the ruqya according to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So just inshallah, the more that we can incorporate dhikr into our lives, the more that we will be healthy spiritually, psychologically, mentally, and also healthy and protected from the unseen. So inshallah, I look forward to seeing you all in the UK, inshallah. Again, I'll be having 2 events in London. One will be a full day course, as well as another seminar in the evening. I'll be coming to Manchester, Bradford, Birmingham, and Blackburn for the first time, inshallah. I'm really, really looking forward to this year's tour and looking forward to my new course, I Seek Change. Get your tickets. The early bird, early registration will be ending some tomorrow. Some will be ending for some cities on Friday. So make sure you get your tickets, inshallah, and also before they sell out. And I look forward to seeing you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.